Irashaimase. Hello and welcome to Fitaurus Kitchen. I'm your host, Chef Fitaurus. It's time once again for Shoot 'em Up Saturday, and on the menu this Saturday we have Zero Gunner 2, the classic Psikyo Dreamcast shoot 'em up, now available for Nintendo Switch. What kind of taste will it have? Let's get cooking and find out. Pressing the A button, we're taken to the start menu for Zero Gunner. We have the ability to choose between 7 difficulty settings right off the bat, from child, which is 1, all the way up to very hard at 7. Selecting our difficulty, we're taken to our machine select. So the fighters we have in Zero Gunner are helicopters. We've got, which are loosely based on real-world helicopters. So we have the Comanche as our blue option, the green option is the Apache, and then there's the yellow Hokum. So the differences between the 3 ships are in their shot style, as well as their options and their missiles. The Hokum is the one I like the best, primarily for its missiles, so that's the one I'll be showing you today. Once we select our ship, we're dropped into stages. There are a total of 7 stages in the game, and one interesting feature is the fact that the stages are random, or at least stages 1 through 4 are random. 5, 6, and 7 are fixed stages. So for a base, Zero Gunner 2 is a vertical shoot 'em up. But we have an interesting feature with that. So if you press a button, you can put down what the game calls is a turn marker. This is basically a pivot point that allows you to go and orient and point yourself in any direction. We can also move away and towards the turn marker, giving us a little bit of ability to dodge if we happen to be in the middle of a firefight while needing to turn ourselves around, which you often will be. In addition to those flavors, we also have a light power-up system. So there's P's that go and power up our main shot, but it's only up to level 3. We start at 1 and we can collect 2 power-ups to get to level 3. You die, you are reset to level 1, but since there's only 2 power-ups to collect to get back up to full power, and you usually drop a power-up upon your death, it's not too much of a setback. As we defeat enemies as well, we also get tons of E's. What the E's do is they power our options. So the options are timed. We have a meter on the left, or if you're playing co-op and you're the second player, on the right of your screen. As you collect the energy, that energy will build up the meter and you'll get certain uses of your options. As I mentioned, each of the fighters has their own options. So the Comanche has a set style where you'll set it down and it'll stay in a stationary position, firing shots until it expires. The Apache has a really neat one where they'll home in on the enemies, dealing really heavy damage. And then for the Hokum, we have... oh, it was kind of bad timing. We have a chase option, ones that will follow us around, kind of Gradius style. So we find ourselves at the boss of the first stage. So the bosses are one of the things I really love about the game. They've got these unique entrances for the various vehicles that we initially encounter, and then those vehicles transform into robots once they've taken a sufficient amount of damage. It's really neat. So here we're on the Alpine Train track stage. We've got 2 trains traveling next to each other on a track, engaging in some serious multi-track drifting. If you get the reference to that, I really appreciate that. That's something that's definitely worth looking into. But I think we've basically covered the basis for what Zero Gunner is. So Zero Gunner 2 originally released in 2001 for the Sega Naomi arcade hardware, and then later that year was ported to the Sega Dreamcast. Unfortunately, as the Dreamcast was already on the way out, it was only ever released in Japan, so being able to get a port of this available worldwide for the Nintendo Switch is really awesome. The story of the game itself is there was this Asian energy conglomerate iGEM that developed this weather control system named Oni, but they didn't really develop it to control the weather, they developed it to take over the world. And once they deployed their weather system, they also deployed their secret militia, and we're this force known as Zero Gunner that's been sent in to stop them and destroy Oni. Nowhere does it really give you the story in the game itself, unfortunately, because it does seem a little bit interesting, but that's what we're looking at. So we're already to stage 3, the submergence city. The space stages themselves are relatively short. Stages 5 and 6 are a little bit longer, with 7 being about as short as the rest of them. So it's not going to be a shoot 'em up that takes a lot of time investment if you're worried about that, but for the most part it's one that is definitely an enjoyable ride. And this stage in particular, I love some of the enemies it throws at us, as you've got a representation of real-world aircraft. There were some A-10s earlier. We also have the, what was it, F-114s? In addition to all this like fantastical mecha hardware that we are also fighting as well. So let's get to the plus and minus flavors of the game, shall we? So there are unfortunately a lot of minus flavors, I feel. For one thing, the port is buggy. I've run into a couple situations where things were just almost inexplicably off. One of them, upon encountering a boss, the music failed to go and load, and even quitting the stage and going back to the main menu, the music just was gone. There was no more music in the game. I had to close down the program and reload it. There was another situation where some of the enemies and character sprites would not load correctly. So there were some enemies, mainly just small fry, so nothing big, fortunately, but that I simply could not see on the screen. And also power-ups and energy pickups were also not being drawn in. It was really problematic, though it was kind of neat, just like flying along and suddenly hit, bam, power-up. Then also, the game's short length could definitely be considered a minus flavor. And then there's the issue of the controls. So it's neat having a vertical scrolling shoot 'em up where you can turn around, but having a turn marker is kind of frustrating. Like, the pivot point takes some getting used to, and once you're used to it, it works alright, but I can't help but feel that if they'd redesigned it with a modern control scheme in mind, and given it something more like twin stick controls, it would have been that much better and stronger of a game. And while we're talking about controls, there's also the issue of being able to go and rebind them. If I'd been able to remap my controls as well, I think I would have been able to adjust to the turn marker system a little bit easier, making it not as much of a frustration. There are a few plus flavors, though. One of the big plus flavors for me is just how clean the game goes and looks. I do always appreciate seeing remasters of older titles, as those titles kind of looked rough, but seeing them done on hardware a couple generations later is always satisfying. Then there's the enemy and mech designs as well. I really, really like those. Both the real-world representation of current military hardware, as well as the more fantastical mech designs that we see for the bosses in particular. And then that's the last major plus flavor is the bosses, specifically their intros. Oh, it's so awesome to go and see them come on screen and how they will transform as we defeat them or move on to later phases in the fights. Definitely one of my favorite parts of the game. And there we have it, Zero Gunner 2 served up for your enjoyment. Overall, I feel it's a little rough of a shoot 'em up. There are definitely better ones out there, but if you're looking to experience a little bit of shoot 'em up history, as Psikyo shooters are definitely some of the funner ones out there, and also get one that's really reasonably priced for the Switch, this is one that I can recommend looking into. Well, that should just about wrap it up for this week's episode of Shoot 'em Up Saturday. As always, I want to thank you so much for coming out and joining me this week. And as always, I look forward to seeing you again next week.